Many women believe that their eyesight is supposed to reduce with age. But in reality, the shape of your eye and your ability to focus changes with environmental stimulus and not age. What if lifestyle hacks like swapping screen time for outdoor time could improve your vision? Today's podcast is not about menopause, but I feel it's an important conversation to have at this stage of life, as I see too many women continue to get stronger and stronger prescriptions without understanding the true cause behind their diminishing vision. My guest, Jake Steiner from End Myopia, has personally reversed his myopia and is now glasses-free with 20/20 vision. Stay tuned to consider other ways to improve your vision. You're listening to Menopause Natural Solutions, episode 111, Naturally Better Vision with Jake Steiner. Welcome to Menopause Natural Solutions, your podcast for all things perimenopause, menopause and beyond. Stay tuned as your host, Naturopath Jennifer Harrington, explains how to use natural therapies to find your ultimate health and happiness during your transition. Well, welcome back. I'm your host, Jen. And today I'm joined with Jake Steiner from End Myopia. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Jen. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Well, Jake, I started this podcast as I wanted to educate women about options. I believe when it comes to your healthcare, an informed choice is always going to be the better choice to make, especially when there's risks and consequences with some of the particular choices. And I'm happy to have you on the podcast today because I feel like we have a shared vision. So can you tell me about how you started End Myopia and what you do?
So I am not, End Myopia is about nearsightedness and short-sightedness primarily. So you're wearing glasses. Without your glasses, you can't see clearly at a distance. A little bit of also conversations about reading glasses, like maybe you need glasses to see things up close. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an optometrist. I'm a stock analyst and trader for the last, well over 20 years. And I had really strong glasses. And then just out of personal curiosity, my eyesight was getting worse again. I went to the optometrist. They said, you need stronger glasses. And that was the first time in my adult life that I went by myself and asked, what's the cause? And they said, it's unknown genetic. Shut up, sit in a seat, pay the money for this prescription. And because of my profession, I tend to ask questions, right? Like it's what I do. Like when people say a mysterious genetic, I go, that seems unlikely. That all humans in the last 50 years developed this sudden genetic change that causes all to not be able to see is unlikely, right? So I started doing research and I figured out what really goes on. And then I set about seeing if I could fix it. And now it's almost 20 years later, and it's grown into this unintended large community of people that are getting rid of depending on glasses.
What I find really interesting is that a lot of people say your eyes change with age. And you don't say that. You say that the eyes change because of the environment.
You know, I'm not getting older. I'm not going to say that I'm almost 50 now. But I begin to resent this talk from doctors of relating any issues I have with age. Because of course we age. Yeah, sure. The thing is not the same as it was when we were 20. But the here, take this pill answer to everything, I find super annoying. And yes, your eyes work fine until the day you die. There are some changes that definitely happen. Your near vision can be slightly affected. But I travel a lot, or I used to when that was possible. And I lived in a lot of countries where selling glasses isn't so much of a business. And older people absolutely don't need reading glasses. And I strongly suspect that this is a more profit-motivated thing than our eyes actually going bad. And before this turns into a giant monologue, I think it's super important as we age to take care of our eyes I'm biased, of course, but when your vision starts to go, psychologically, you just put yourself in a place where you go, I'm old. And I think preventing that is super helpful in just maintaining a positive and helpful outlook, right?
So I guess we should possibly even talk about your definition of myopia.
So nearsightedness, short-sightedness, if you take off your glasses, you can't see clearly far away. It depends which country you're in. I don't know if you guys use short-sighted or nearsighted, but it's one of those.
I think we use short-sighted.
Yeah. So that's it. It sounds weird because you'd think it's the opposite, right? Like short-sighted, like you can't see clear up close, but it's actually you can't see clearly at a distance. And as we age, we start to be sold reading glasses, but I think that's also not necessary. So you easily end up in a spot where in your 50s, all of a sudden, you're wearing glasses that you have for distance correction since you were a teenager, possibly. And now all of a sudden you need reading glasses and you get this complicated correction of far and close and you can't see anywhere by yourself. And that I really don't think helps with the process of moving through life when you have this, you wake up in the morning, you can't see anything, you know?
Well, I have definitely noticed a change in my eyes over the last few years, but I can put it down to environment. I used to do all my consultations in person, and now I do all my consultations online. So the difference between looking at a person in a room versus focusing on a tiny screen and a little camera, my eyesight has definitely decreased, and I don't put it down to age. I put it down to the change in the way I work. And little things like I've been following you for a while, Jake, and little things like getting outside and looking in the distance has made a difference. Like I don't have sore eyes at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so the short version of this is the eye's a ball, right? In the front of the ball is a lens. It's a flexible lens, and it's surrounded by a circular muscle, and that muscle tensions the lens when you look at something up close. And the retina is in the back of the eyeball where the light focuses, and the lens shapes to focus the light on the back of the eyeball, on the retina as you need it, and it changes by distance. If you look at something 6 meters and greater away, that muscle is totally relaxed. And the closer you get, the more that muscle gets tight. So when you look at a tiny screen, for sustained extended periods of time, you have this tight muscle that after a certain period of time and after a certain amount of repeated ongoing tightness doesn't relax completely. So it's like if you take a camera lens and you put it in manual mode and you just leave it in close up and you point it at a distance, things are blurry. That's what happens to your eyes. So it's just that muscle is still somewhat in close up mode. So what you're perceiving there as my vision is worse is actually just muscle spasm, right? Like it's definitely not age related. Like if you're having close up, like if you're having issues with your distance vision decreasing, definitely not age related. That's a muscle thing.
Just because I know who you are, my viewers, my listeners might not know who you are. So how did you get started with the work that you do in the first place? So you mentioned that it was a personal curiosity, that your eyes were getting worse, the optometrists weren't giving you the answers that you were looking for, and you went off on your own little adventure through the research.
Yeah, so I love modern medicine. Like it's amazing the diagnostic tools and interventions that are available. Super cool. At the same time, I don't have any blind trust in doctors. My parents are both medical doctors. So I was raised at the lunch and dinner table of hearing the inside stories, which makes me very much more skeptical of just going, sure, doctor, whatever you say. So I'm just curious, right? Like when things happen that I'm told are a failing of my body that can't be remedied other than by some kind of subscription to some kind of product. People call it prescription. I prefer subscription, right? Like it's, I just explain to me the cause is always my first thing. And doctors get annoyed because I'm like, so where does this start out? If you're selling me a treatment, tell me what cause this treatment addresses. And the big red flag with the optometrist for me was they're not addressing a cause. They're giving me this blanket, muddy answer of unknown genetics. And one of my favorite things, and skepticism, I think, is incredibly healthy when it comes to internet and magical things that you're not ever heard before. So scholar.google.com is my favorite resource online for clinical science research, right? Like, I'm not saying read all the studies, but if you're hearing a weird dude, you guys don't get video, so you don't see my amazing beard. But if you get a weird dude who goes, I'm not a doctor, but this $100 billion industry is lying to you, scholar.google.com, search to see first if there's any science supporting this talk, right? And that's what I did, but this was before the internet. So I went to libraries, and the real short version is pseudomyopia, Pseudo myopia. You type that into Google Scholar, and you only get peer-reviewed clinical science in the search results. So if I'm saying that your poor distance vision is caused by a focusing muscle spasm, and you wonder, is this guy just crazy talking? Type in pseudomyopia, and you're going to see studies, tens of thousands of cited clinical work going back 50 plus years, showing that this is absolutely the case, right? So that's where I found it, except I went to libraries and I just went, is this a genetic thing? And what I found instead is, no, it's a muscle spasm. And the people that don't sell you glasses in the same general industry, right, in the academia side of it, fully understand that it's a muscle spasm. And the correct answer would be less of the tiny screen and more of the outside time. I think it's super important that when you're presented with these options, I love the options. I go to the ophthalmologist every year. Like an eye checkup is a brilliant thing. I like the mainstream for diagnostics and for, right, like, explain to me the cause. Like, there's lots of eye things that can happen where you really, really, really want modern medicine. If you have retinal detachment or stuff where things need to get lasered back together, super cool, right? Like, I'm a totally big fan. But glasses cost $2 to $5 wholesale, the lenses in your glasses, to the optometrist. So when the optometrist says this is $200 and a prescription, they have a huge profit motive. It's a $100 billion a year industry. So I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong because of that, but it's a good idea to question the motives when the guy telling you, we don't know the cause, but here's a thing that makes me 5,000% profit margin, that the guy maybe has, an incentive that's not in line with your eyesight, possibly.
So what other options do people have?
Well, you can listen to a crazy guy on the internet who claims to have an imaginary beard, which today is real because I've been on this island and not shaving for like a month. So the option is you can measure your eyesight at home. And people don't understand in general because the optometrist is very opaque in what they're selling you. They call it a prescription. There's numbers on it. The numbers are confusing. You just go, all right, fine, he's the expert. Your vision is, if you wear glasses, it's just how far can you see before things get blurry, right? Like, for example, if you hold a book up close and you can read it clearly, and then you slowly move it back until the letters just become slightly blurry, like you notice a change in your vision. And then you take a measuring tape, any kind of measuring device, and you put it next to your eye socket up to the book, and you measure that distance. And say that's 50 centimeters. So you can read a book at 50 centimeters before there's any kind of blur. So the way glasses work, diopters, the weird numbers on the prescription, it's just how far before there's blur. So if you take, the formula is super simple. So you take 100 divided by the distance. So you can see 50 centimeters. So 100 divided by 50 is 2. So if you were to buy 2 diopter glasses, you have perfect eyesight. I hope that's not too long and complicated. Basically, just take the book, however far you can see, divide that by 100. And that number that comes out of it, if you buy that in diopters, then you have perfect vision. And the optometrist's giant charade, and I apologize to optometrists, but all it is that, like a distance to blur measurement. So what you can do at home is a measuring tape is, nothing, $1. You buy a measuring tape, you take a book, and you do your home measurement. And then you compare good lighting, natural ambient lighting to crappy lighting. You compare a happy, good diet without any giant insulin spikes to a not so great diet. You compare a crappy long day at work to a relaxing hike, measure that distance, put in a little note, and you notice that distance will vary, right? Like if normally it's 50, if you just had a great weekend and you just met with friends and you didn't do anything stressful, maybe the distance is 60, meaning you need less diopters today to have perfect vision. And if you ate a giant pizza and had a Coke and you have a huge insulin spike, that distance might be 40. So the starting point is always empowering yourself by removing that person from the loop that keeps you from understanding how things are working. And super easy, just measuring tape. And then you take out a little book and you write down, okay, I went for a hike and this was the number afterwards. Or I watched Netflix for 5 hours because it's been raining, or they locked me inside. And now it's 38, right? And as you have those numbers, you start going, I can intervene in this in a way to tend towards the higher numbers. First step towards, and then at some point you feel confident enough to go, okay, 50 centimeters is 2 diopters, and I'm getting towards 40. So you look up how many diopters that is, and you go online and you buy those glasses. Slightly weaker. You're reducing your dependence on that diopter a little tiny bit.
I would also add that you're adding an awareness, so that when you realize certain things that you're doing are giving you a not so great result, you can cut some of those things out and spend more time doing the things that increase your vision. So there's also that awareness as well as whatever else is going on.
Super important. Yeah, you're right. And it's that empowerment of not making you more and more dependent on going to yet another office, filling yet another so-called prescription, waking up a little bit crappier today than yesterday, right? Like that's my goal as I'm not at all getting older here, is I'm becoming much more conscious of how to tune this thing to function as well as it can, right? And when you open your eyes and your eyesight is better today than it was last year, you're not feeling older, I think.
That sounds lovely. That sounds very nice. So if we can have a quick chat about your website, because that has so many different resources on it. You've got videos, you've got your 7-day email system. How can you assist people or women that want to maybe stop getting more and more stronger prescription lenses and want to actually have another look at this to see what they can do differently to improve their eyesight and maybe even reduce the strength of the glasses that they're wearing? How do you support them?
Sure. The first time you visit the site, it may be a little bit shocking and intimidating because I'm not doing this for fame or money. It's more of a personal entertainment project that turned into this big community. So there's a lot of inside jokes and sarcasm and just funny to me stuff going on. But
and it is a big community.
It is a big community. Yeah, the Facebook group has 22 or 3,000 members now. And I never promote anything. So it's just growing by itself. And our forum has like 90,000 some views the last month. The website, of course, the YouTube channel, which is mildly terrifying, has like 40-some thousand, I think, subscribers.
Well done.
But it's not me, right? Like I'm the librarian of a resource, and it's mostly people going, this has worked for me. And I collect a lot of that stuff, and then I put it more into a concise format of, for most people, this approach is the most effective. And then my goal is, when I step away from all this stuff, that there's people helping each other, right? Like we don't need to depend on this $100 billion industry to sell us things that make us progressively worse if we don't rely on them.
That's wonderful. That you're leaving a legacy. You're creating something that's supporting many for a long time to come.
Well, there's two things really. Like one is, I would have stopped this a long time ago because I do other stuff that makes money. But the two things that happen, one is I resent it personally when I go to an optometrist and they treat me with this arrogance of, you don't know anything, right? I can read the same books they can read. Like that's one thing where I'm like, you're pushing a product down my throat while you're not being very kind. Not all, there's some amazing ones, but the industry in general is not very, focused on my eyesight being great. And then the other thing is parents, right? Like I see parents letting their kids hold iPhones and watch YouTube all day long. And that close-up distance will lock their focusing muscle. And then the kid will squint and the parent is going to go, whoops, that's not cool. Take them to the optometrist, kid gets glasses. And now you spend a lifetime of the child growing up being affected by the lens wear. They're going to get bullied by kids in school because they're going to seem weird with lenses, right? Like you act different because your neck movement and your eye movement is affected. You're training your eyes to look straight forward. You get anxious because you don't have peripheral vision. So things that come out of the periphery are freaking you out. So now you act more timid. Happened to me, happens to kids in general. So you're affecting the development of the child. And while I'm not trying to save the world, I don't really care. But when it comes to kids, I think it's super unfair that we're taking profit over their future, and I think there needs to be just this education where that you wearing glasses is a choice. It's because you love screens more than you like going outside. Whatever, that's cool. But the next generation not being given that option, I think sucks. And I really feel like we live in a world where imagine that McDonald's is telling people that eating at McDonald's is necessary and great for you, and it's just genetic that you're getting fat. That's where we're at with optometry,
Yeah. And that's where I like the idea of informed consent. That if you're aware of the options and what you can do about it, like you're curious enough to get some more education and some ideas so that you can make a choice. If I want instant better eyesight, I can wear glasses, but there may be consequence that I may need to get stronger glasses as time goes on versus do I want to spend some time now trying to improve my eyesight over time? I don't know. Are there any consequences?
I think informed consent, like how long before that's going to become a censored term? Are we still allowed to say that? Are we allowed to have informed consent? I didn't know we do.
I just think it's a virus that you can't mention.
Oh, I'm joking. But it does seem like, yeah, there is a definite not informed consent thing going on. Right? Like, it's okay. So here's another one, just short version. If you go to scholar.google.com and you just type in lens-induced myopia, meaning short-sightedness caused by lens wear, meaning literally the thing that they're selling you as a treatment is causing more of the symptom. Imagine you get a headache, right? And they say, take this pill, your headache goes away. And the pill, if you stop taking it, will give you more headaches than you did before. Imagine that. Imagine a treatment that makes the condition worse if you don't continue the treatment. And you type lens-induced myopia into Google Scholar, so it doesn't sound like me crazy talking. You'll get tens of thousands of search results that show that the glasses that they sell you cause your eyeball to elongate, which causes more myopia. So literally the treatment they sell you causes more of the underlying symptom. So it's the opposite of informed consent. It's literally, if you walk in there and you buy the treatment, you're going to become dependent on their treatment. That's today's reality. Sucks.
I was going to ask about headaches because a lot of people would start going to see an optometrist because they are getting headaches or feeling fatigue.
We can chat.
Or do you want to go down that path?
We can go down any path. Yeah, headaches are interesting.
But they're not much fun when you're getting them.
No, they're not. And there's a million reasons for headaches, right? Like I'm not an expert on headaches, but if you changing your habits that involve more screen time and you all of a sudden get headaches, there is a troubleshooting question mark of what's going on there. And if you go to the optometrist and you get new glasses and then you get headaches and then you go back and you're like, I'm getting headaches, and they go, you'll get used to it in a few weeks. That's a big red flag also. Because I hear that a lot. You get stronger glasses, right? Because I have to tell you something. So you go in there, the assumption is always your eyesight got worse. So you get a slightly increased so-called prescription very commonly. And then not completely uncommonly, you walk out of there and now you have this amazing crystal clear vision. But after an hour or two, you're like, ugh, this doesn't feel right. And then you go back, and then the answer invariably is a few weeks, you'll be used to it. And that's just, they increased your diopter dependence. You get super clear vision, but your visual cortex goes, this is not right. This is no good. Your eye strain is increased. And after a few weeks, you lose that strain awareness. And then you're like, yeah, it seems fine now. But what they did in effect is just they upped the dosage, right? And your body said, no, thanks to that. But eventually it gets used to it. And now you have a higher dosage, basically.
So what do you think of more permanent options like LASIK surgery?
LASIK surgery is awesome. Any kind of surgical intervention for non-dramatic, immediate problems is always great. I have a podcast, but not really, because I only talk to people working on the Eyesight because I want to share firsthand experiences. I've only ever done one actual episode ever. And that was with the head of the American FDA surgical devices, Dr. Morris Waxler, who got LASIK approved. He's 75 now. He's got this like crazy white Einstein hair going everywhere. Older gentleman. He got LASIK approved. He was the guy. And I've only ever done one podcast because people keep asking me about LASIK. And I've known Morris for many years and I know his story. The man who got LASIK approved, right? Like, so we're not talking the outside. We're not talking some conspiracy or people's opinion. This is the man in the FDA himself. He says, I recommend that podcast. I do a terrible interview, but he goes off for an hour in a way that is shocking to hear from an ex-government official. He says, first of all, the approval process included no long-term medical consequence review. So to say none, and he literally, and I quote him because this is amazing. He said two things that we're looking for. One is you could read 20/20 on an eye chart, which he says doesn't mean anything for your actual quality of eyesight. And two, that your eyeballs didn't fall out of your head. And now the man sent me pages of references before we had this interview. So nothing he said was just idle talk. Like every single thing he said backed up by published documents. And I have all those in the show notes. And he was literally like, we didn't review medical consequences. We didn't. LASIK got approved. And he goes, I mean, it's an hour long. He's like, for example, you cut the cornea. So the structure of the cornea is compromised, the front of your eyeball. You cut the nerves, so you have no pain sensation. This is, again, the head of the FDA saying this, right? For a year, right? The nerves till they grow back together. So for a year, you might be fine. And after that, you might have pain in your eyeball that could be going on for who knows how long. We didn't know because we didn't check for it. This is a 75-year-old man. This is not just some guy trying to sell a course or something on the internet. This is the head of the FDA going, well, we didn't check for that. He says 30% risk of permanent dry eyes. Did we check for that? No. Did we mention that? No. And he says before they got it approved, doctors were performing LASIK without approval, and he calls it cowboy attitudes. And he says the FDA didn't really have control over that because they regulate the device use, not the surgical procedure. And since then, he spent the rest of his life trying to reverse that decision. But of course he can't because it's a gigantic business now and the cat is out of the bag. But you might have a friend, LASIK worked out great for them. Of course, plenty of people have good results. But I strongly recommend listening to that guy before considering LASIK, just because he's the man on the inside, and seeing his face and seeing his body language and seeing the urgency and hearing his words, I think is really impactful in making that decision. Maybe.
That is so scary. This is audio, but my face is just, my jaw has dropped. It's just unbelievably scary.
I couldn't believe it because I'm just a dude, right? Like I'm not fighting the injustice of the world. Like I'm running a casual project going, hey, you don't need glasses. And all of a sudden I have this guy on who is he's the dude who put the stamp on the thing that we have LASIK now. And he's like, terrible idea. He talks about suicides. He talks about all kinds of stuff. the FDA, who is like infamous lately for all of their interesting decision making. And just talking to a guy on the inside makes you kind of go, I wonder how that organization runs now. Not saying anything, but they approved eye surgery without any medical consequence study. Like, how about that? There you go.
Let's move on to a more interesting topic. So we've diet and lifestyle. So you've mentioned getting off the screens and getting outside and looking more long distance. You've mentioned sugar and insulin spikes. Has there been any other dietary or lifestyle changes that you've seen have benefited eyesight?
So this sounds trite. And the reason that what I'm talking about isn't, I think, more popular is because it costs nothing and it speaks in the opposite direction of the screen addiction that we're all getting, right? Like, distance vision improves your eyesight. So if you like bird watching, or you have interesting hobbies, or you have a reason to get away from your screen, distance vision relaxes the focusing muscle. And the eye, I don't know how far we want to get in the biology, but it has a whole system to adjust its shape, the length of it. The thing that makes your eyesight worse with glasses also goes in the opposite direction till the day you die. It's not a youth thing. And so the more time you spend interacting with the real world and being outside and being with friends and being in environments, I don't know if you're still allowed to be with friends, but just being in places that are not involving a screen will positively affect your eyesight. The better you eat, right? The better the quality of your lighting is, the better your sleep is, the better your eyes are. And I was super happy that we got to have this chat, because your main topics aren't really super necessarily eyesight related, but I always say it's a system. The whole thing is one system, and your eyes are always telling you how you're doing. If you can't see well, it's because you're doing stuff that is making your eyes unhappy. Whether it's the glasses.
They're the only external part of your brain.
Yeah, true. Right. And we're so not appreciating them. We're just so casual about this. Yeah, this seems fine. Right. And then they sell us these things and we're like, yeah, that seems fine. And super biased, but I think there's so much positive quality of life in focusing on eyesight.
I agree. And you mentioned lighting. So these days, with the move to more energy-saving lighting, more LED lights, do you want to go down that path?
It sucks. It sucks, because what I used to talk about 10 years ago was just the mechanics of getting rid of glasses, which is pretty easy. Right? It's not that hard. And I'm trying not to become this hippie dude who is going, go outside more. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, shut up. I don't want to preach, right? I don't want to be like the lifestyle coach, but stuff like, I'm going to go there, is you get up earlier and you take advantage of the natural light, and you go to bed earlier when the natural light goes away. I'm not saying go to bed at 8, but if you get up at 10 a.m. and you are up till midnight, you miss a big window of natural light that's good for you for all sorts of things. Right. And the screen, the light that emanates from the screen is super not great for you. Narrow spectrum lighting, the lighting that comes from these energy efficient things, all of that stuff. What I talked about before, measuring the distance. If you go outside and you stand in the shade and you measure your distance to blur, and it's usually 50 centimeters, it's going to be way more in natural daylight. And if you measure it in fluorescent or whatever crap lighting, it's going to be way less. Right? Like, there's instant feedback in your eyes are not happy about the spectrum of lighting that is being made available.
There's so many other benefits apart from better eyesight. And I've had other podcasts where we spoke about the quality of sleep and stress hormones and cortisol. And so, yes, getting outside, natural light, and seeing what you can do inside. Like, can you open up your windows to get some more natural light in versus turning on some more light switches?
Yeah. And as many activities that can tempt you away from the screen. because the screen itself emits light that's not brilliant, So even if you're doing things in the house, if they don't involve a screen, good for your eyes and probably good for your brain also to not just be consuming content all the time. Maybe.
So getting back to reading books the way that they were designed to be, words on paper versus words on screen. Yes.
I have a Kindle, and I'm turning into this exact dude that I never wanted to be. Because, when we're younger, we're like freaking old people, and I walk to school 10 miles in the snow uphill. But I have a Kindle because the thing has no backlighting, and it's the technology is literally printing the words onto a screen, and that's all it does. There's no flickering, there's no blah. It's super simple, and it emulates the page of a book. I bought a stack of them, and I keep giving them to friends with interesting books on them. Here, I'm like, here, read this. It doesn't have notifications. It doesn't have blah. It's so nice. Yeah, and you can read a book, and it's going to be less stressful for your eyes than scrolling through YouTube or whatever.
Less stressful than a printed book?
No, not less. The printed book is the best option by far. And I guess I travel a lot, and I live in places where I don't have the access to the most printed books possible. A Kindle is a really nice, close substitute. Much better than iPad.
With packing. You're not packing 10 books in your bag. You're packing one Kindle. I totally get that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I found that really interesting, and I've learned a lot more about eyes. So apart from End Myopia, what was your YouTube?
Everything is on End Myopia. If you go to endmyopia.org, there's like a resource link that goes to all our stuff. We have a giant wiki page that's made by the community and the forum and the YouTube and the Facebook group. And then people have started like Telegram groups and Discord. I don't know how these things work because it's a lot of different age groups all over the world doing this stuff. But all of it's in the resources link. So whatever way you're into connecting with people, options are there.
Fantastic. Well, look, Jake, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you get out of Thailand soon.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I love Thailand. It's great.
Okay, ladies, have a great week wherever you are, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Menopause Natural Solutions. This podcast contains general information about menopause. It is provided as a guide, and it is not intended to replace medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend.